Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. The Cat Who. Book 1, The Cat Who Could Read Backwards. Chapter 7, Part 2. The electric clock knocked off the desk stopped at 6:15. The gallery was closed at that time. Right. Any evidence of forcible breaking and entering? No. Then the murderer could have been someone who had legitimate access to the place. Could be. We found the front door locked. The alley door may or may not have been locked when Mrs. Lambert arrived. Anything stolen? Not immediately apparent. Wojciech started to move away. That's all. You've got the story. One more question. Any suspects? No. Downstairs, while Brunson scrambled around taking pictures, Qwuilleran studied the nature of the vandalism. 2 oil paintings had been ripped diagonally by a sharp instrument. A framed picture lay on the floor with its glass broken, as if a heel had been put through it. A reddish clay sculpture appeared to have been bounced off a marble-topped table. There were scattered fragments. Paintings by Zoe Lambert and Scarrow, the only 2 names that registered with Qwuilleran, were unharmed. He remembered the sculpture from his previous visit. Elongated shape with random swells had appeared to have been a woman's figure. Its label, still affixed to the empty pedestal, said, "Eve," by B. H. Riggs, terracotta. The watercolor on the floor was one Quill had not noticed the week before. It resembled a jigsaw puzzle of many colors. Just a pleasing pattern. It was titled Interior, and the artist's name was Mary Orr. The label called it a gouache. Then Quill examined the 2 oils. Both were composed of wavy vertical stripes of color, applied on a white background with a wide brush. The colors were violent, red, purple, orange, pink, and the paintings seemed to be vibrant, like a plucked string. Qwuilleran wondered who would buy these nerve-wracking works of art. He preferred his second-rate Monet. Stepping closer to check the labels, he noticed one was Beach Scene No. 3 by Mary Orr, oil, while the other was Beach Scene No. 2 by the same artist. In a way, the titles were a help in appreciating the pictures. They began to remind Qwuilleran of shimmering heat waves rising from the hot sand. He said to Brunson, "Look at these pictures. Would you say they were beach scenes?" "I'd say the artist was drunk," said Odd. Qwuilleran moved back a few paces and squinted at the 2 oils. Suddenly he saw a crowd of standing figures. He had been looking at the red, orange, and purple stripes, and he should have been seeing the white voids between them. The vertical stripes of white suggested the contour of female bodies, abstract but recognizable. He thought, women's figures in these white strips, a woman's torso in the broken clay. Let's have another look at the watercolor. When he knew what he was searching for, it was not hard to find. In the jagged wedges of color that made up the pattern of Mary Orr's work, he could distinguish a window, a chair, and a bed, on which reclined a human figure. Female. He said to Oddberson, I'd like to go to the Lambeth house and see if Zoe will talk to me. Also, she might have a photograph of the deceased. Shall we check with the desk? After phoning the details to a rewrite man and getting a go-ahead from the city desk, Qwuilleran folded himself into Oddberson's cramped two-seater, and they drove to 3434 Sampler Street. The Lambeth home was a contemporary townhouse in a new neighborhood, self-consciously well-designed, that had replaced a former slum. The newsman rang the doorbell, and waited. Drapes were drawn to cover the large windows, but it could be seen that lights were burning in every room, upstairs and down. They rang the bell again. When the door opened, the torsoed woman who stood there, arms folded belligerently, feet planted solidly on the threshold, looked familiar to Qwuilleran. She was tall and husky. Her soft face was set in a stern expression. Yes, she said defiantly. I'm a friend of Mrs. Lambeth, said Qwuilleran. I wondered if I could see her and offer my assistance. Jim Qwilleran's the name. This is Mr. Burson. You're from the paper. She's not going to see any reporters tonight. This isn't an official business. We were on our way home and thought there might be something we could do. Aren't you Miss Bolton? Inside the house, a low, tired voice called, Who is it, Butchie? Qwuilleran and another man from the Fluxion. It's all right. Ask the men. The newsman stepped into a room furnished with stark contemporary style. The furnishings were few, but fine, and there, leaning against the door jamb, was Zoe Lambeth, wearing purple silk trousers and a lavender blouse, and looking gaunt and bewildered. Butchie said she should be lying down and resting. Zoe said, I'm all right. I'm too keyed up to do any resting. She wouldn't take a sedative. Will you gentlemen sit down? Zoe said. Qwuilleran's face reflected the sympathetic understanding for which he was famous. Even his mustache contributed to the expression of grave concern. He said, I don't need to tell you my feelings. Even though our acquaintance was short, I feel a personal loss. It's just terrible, just terrible. Zoe sat on the extreme edge of the sofa, with her hands folded on her knees. I visited the gallery last week, as you suggested. I know, Earl told me. It's impossible to imagine what a shock this must have been. But she interrupted. I don't think she should talk about it. Butchie, I've got to talk about it, said Zoe, or I'll go crazy. She looked at Qwuilleran with the full brown eyes he remembered so well from their first meeting. And now they reminded him of the eyes in Zoe's own paintings at the gallery. He said, Was it your custom to go to the gallery after it closed? Quite the contrary. I seldom went there at any time. It looks unprofessional for an artist to hang around the gallery that handles her work, especially in our case, husband and wife. It would look too folksy. The gallery impressed me as very sophisticated, Qwuilleran said, very suitable for financial district. But she said, with a frank, slow pride, that was Zoe's idea. Mrs. Lambert, what caused you to go to the gallery tonight? I was there twice. The first time was just before closing. I had been shopping all afternoon and stopped in to see if Earl wanted to stay downtown for dinner. He said he couldn't leave until 7 o'clock or later. What time was it when you were talking to him? The front door was still open, so it must have been before 5:30. Did he explain why he couldn't leave the gallery? He had to work on the books for a tax deadline or something, so I went home. But I was tired and didn't feel like cooking. But she said she's been working all night and day getting ready for a one-man show. So I decided to have a bath and change clothes. Zoe went on, and go back downtown at 7 o'clock and drag Earl away from his books. Did you telephone him to say you were returning to the gallery? I think so. Or maybe I didn't. I can't remember. I thought about phoning, but in the rush of getting dressed, I don't know whether I called or not. You know how it is. You do things automatically, without thinking. Sometimes I can't remember whether I brushed my teeth. And I have to look at the toothbrush to see if it's wet. When did you arrive at the gallery the second time? Just about 7 o'clock, I think. Earl had taken the car in for repairs, so I called a taxi and had the driver take me to the alley entrance of the gallery. I have a key for the back door, just in case of emergencies. It was locked? That's another thing I don't remember. It should have been locked. I put my key in the lock and turned the door handle without thinking much about it. The door opened, and I went in. Did you notice anything amiss on the ground floor? No, the lights were out. I went right up the spiral staircase. As soon as I walked into the workroom, I sensed something was wrong. It was deadly quiet. I was almost afraid to go into the office. She remembered it painfully. But I did. First I saw papers and everything all over the floor, and then she put her face in her hands, and there was silence in the room. After a while, Qwuilleran said gently, Would you like me to notify Mount Clemens in New York? I know he thought highly of you both. If you wish. Have funeral plans been made? But she said, There won't be a funeral. Zoe doesn't approve of funerals. Qwuilleran stood up. We'll be going now. But please let me know, Miss Lambert, if there's anything I can do. Sometimes it helps just to talk. But she says, I'm here. I'm looking after her. Qwuilleran thought the woman sounded possessive. He said, Just one more thing, Miss Lambert. Do you have a good photograph of your husband? No, just a portrait I painted last year. It's in my studio. Butchie will show you. I think I'll go upstairs. She walked from the room without further ceremony, and Butchie led the newsman to the studio at the rear of the house. There on the wall was Earl Lambert, cold, haughty, supercilious, painted without love. Perfect likeness, said Butchie with pride. She really captured his personality. And almost inaudible was the click of Odd Bonson's camera.